Well, good morning, everybody. My name is George Carey. Work here at FIA, and we're gathered this morning to do a presentation on the product line known as Centrotherm. I have a colleague of mine, Rob Ellis, is going to be kind of working the chat line. If you guys have a question as we start to go through this presentation, as well as obviously we'll do a little Q&A at the end if there are any residual questions left over. Normally, as we begin this, Rob will probably mute everybody just so we don't have any background noises to distract, etc. And so without any further ado, I think I'm going to jump right into it. FIA, which is the piping itself is called Inno Flu, but it's Centrotherm is the name of the manufacturer. It's a polypropylene vent line. We were awarded the line back in this past January 2020, and so it's kind of a learning curve for everyone at FIA just to come up to speed with this product line and what it has to offer. And then of course this thing happened. So I'm not sure of all of the participants this morning, but those that are involved in jobs either designing or installing or selling in the state of Massachusetts, we had attended a meeting, a plumbing board meeting back in February, and they made a code change. And they basically said the only plastic piping that can be used moving forward for venting appliances will either be CPVC or polypropylene. They have this other out that they refer to other pipes which have been product accepted for that purpose by the board. So if someone has something very specific, they might do a presentation to the board and they might make a decision. But other than that, it's polypropylene or CPVC are the only two materials to be used for venting flue gases. Then that change had been sent to Charlie Baker, a couple months ago now, and it's just waiting for his signature to become officially part of the code. At which point, plumbing inspectors would not be able to approve an appliance, furnace, water heater, boiler that's in category 4 using PVC moving forward. So anyway, so that urgency to kind of come up to speed with the line just got accelerated with this whole change in the code. So we're going to find out how much PVC was actually sold over the years for venting appliances. So anyways, just real quick, you get into venting, and we've been dealing with venting systems for a while just through our relationship with Lochinvar, the boiler manufacturer we've been representing and water heater manufacturer for quite a few years now. But specifically when we get into the flue gas piping, we're dealing with category 4. Category 4 is right over here, and it's referring to the vent pipe is in a positive pressure, and then the vent temperature can drop below 140 degrees, which means it can lead to condensing of flue gases, and it's a sealed combustion. So positive pressure, sealed combustion, potentially below 140 degrees, which means gas flue products will condense back into condensate. So that system, that venting network, has to be able to support this, and that's what we're referring to. So Inno Flu, Centrotherm, it's a gas vent system, and that's kind of the mentality we want to think about. It's not putting together some various pieces of pipe with couplings and call it a venting system. This polypropylene system is made for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to vent category 4 flue gases. That's it. It's a residential commercial offering, anywhere from 2, 3, and 4 inch. They kind of categorize as their residential offering, and then 6, 8, 10, and 12 inch diameters would constitute the commercial side of the business. But as you can see over here, just a collection of fittings and what have you. But it's to put this whole thing together. And each individual application might have different requirements. But the big thing, I guess, would start off with is, if you notice, it's a gasketed system. There's no solvents, there's no glue, there's no any of putting two pieces of pipe together through a coupling and glue it and make it one. This is a gasketed system, very, very different, and been around a long time. This is nothing new. It's just fairly new to the United States. Came over a while ago. We'll get into that. But I guess the main thing is it's gasketed, and it's a system, and it's made for one purpose and one purpose only. Category 4 water heaters, furnaces, and boilers. It's tested to the and listed with UL 1738, which is the most stringent applicable flue gas codes in the United States for category 4 venting. So just know that when you're looking at this product or thinking about possibly either using it or specifying it or what have you, it's the real deal. It's made for this one application, venting flue gases in a category 4 system. Back up just for a second. Who is Centrotherm? Well, they're a subsidiary of a parent company called Centrotech. And Centrotech is kind of a energy efficiency technology manufacturer. And they play in kind of 3 arenas. They play in the medical plastics, climate systems, and then the gas flue systems. And Centrotherm falls into this particular category of systems that they manufacture and design. It's been in Europe for 35 years, Europe and Asia for 35 years. About 2009, Centrotherm Ecosystems was formed, and that was they made the decision from Europe to come over to the North American market and enter into it. And I think it kind of makes sense because over in Europe, almost all of the residential heating takes place is going to be a hydronic boiler. Everything over there is wet heat. And if you think about it, Lochinvar introduced our first modulating condensing night boiler in 2005. And there were other manufacturers that were there a couple of years before us, and some have come in since then. But certainly by 2009, there was an established ModCon market, boiler market in the Northeast or in North America, but specifically on kind of the East Coast. So they made that decision and they came to the United States. And what they quickly found out was that, yes, there is a growing ModCon boiler market, but there's a substantial high efficiency gas furnace market throughout the whole country. And so they realized they had other opportunities. So they settled, bought a facility up here in Albany, New York. And that's where they do, on the left-hand side, you'll see a kind of a view of the manufacturing capabilities of what they can manufacture here. They do everything. They do the fittings, they do all the piping except for the 10-inch and the 12-inch diameter. That's still coming over from Europe. But within the next few months, we're being told that the 10-inch machine will be online. So the only pipe remaining will be 12-inch, which they will be addressing. So eventually Albany will be a full manufacturing, 12-inch down to 2, flex, all the fittings, etc. The benefit to that is that on the right-hand side over here, full inventory. Albany is less than a day away from New England. So we have, in addition to all of our wholesale support distribution that has inventory in place, if we have a hole, we have a gap, we need something, we can get it very quickly. So I want to speak just briefly or quickly about what this standard's all about, the UL 1738. And when they made that decision, because they had the highest standards that they qualified or certified to over in Europe. So when they came to the United States, North America, they said, what's the most stringent? We want to test to that because we know our product should be able to pass it. So within 1738, there are 2 classes that kind of categorized on temperature. Class 1 is over 275, but not more than 473. Class 2, which is what we're going to be dealing with, is venting systems for gas-fired appliances with flue gases no more than or less than 275, And that's what Inno Flu Centrotherm is tested to, the 1738 class 2. And within that 1738 class 2, there are actually 3 classifications, an A, B, and a C, and it's all temperature based. The A would be maxed out at 140 degrees, which is where PVC would have had its limits. CPVC can go up to 194 degrees, although normal operating temperatures are around 180 for CPVC. And then more importantly, where we reside for the polypropylene, it's tested up to 302 degrees before it starts to soften, but a normal suitable temperature limit is 230 degrees, which is certainly fine for our furnaces, boiler applications, and water heater applications. To pass that 1738, there are 6 requirements, if you will, to say, hey, at the end of that test, they stamp it, say, yep, you're certified, you qualify for this venting code, if you will, or guide. Zero tolerance to combustibles, the material that they use, the polypropylene. Support requirements. Vent system must withstand a 9-kilogram or almost a 20-pound impact test. And to do that, what happens is they have support clamps that are required every 78 inches on the pipe run in a vertical orientation and every 39 inches in the horizontal. Another requirement is flammability, ULCS 102.2. You have two categories. You have a flame spread code, which is less than 25, which all that refers to is how far and how fast does that flame, if the piping was to catch on fire, if there was a fire in the building and the pipe was exposed to it. And then a less than 50, which is a smoke developed index, and that's measuring the concentration of smoke. So the material that they use, the polypropylene, as they manufacture that product, it meets this requirement. Another condition, cold weather impact. So they temperature cycle down to minus 40 degrees Celsius, which oddly enough is also minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. This is kind of an important one, the second to last, the joint requirements. It's a 100-pound pull test. And literally, they put together a joint and they'll hang a 100-pound weight on that joint to make sure that it holds. And once it passes that, that's another requirement within that 1738. And the last one here is the aging. They put the pipe and fittings in a 180-day UV climate chamber, and Centrotherm has passed them as well. So they meet all of these requirements. And like I said at the beginning, it is a gas vent system. Not even going to talk about PVC. It's really not an issue. The only thing I want to highlight here is weight. If I was to look at, just for a quick example, because it's substantially lighter, the material, the polypropylene, than CPVC. So if I was to look at a 10-inch diameter pipe, what they're showing over here is the weight is listed in pounds per foot. So a 10-inch diameter, 2 pounds per foot. If I have a 10-foot piece of 10-inch, I get 20 pounds of weight. Same 10-foot piece of CPVC is 130 pounds. So a substantial difference, which could impact perhaps labor, number of guys touching it, having to work on it to install it. So why Inno Flu? It is that gasketed system, and it comes complete, and they manufacture basically everything needed to go from the adapter when you connect to the appliance to where you terminate through the sidewall or up through the roof or up through a chimney chase, what have you. Another thing that they really pushed when they did get over here to North America is they went after every category 4 appliance in the gas industry. So boilers, tanked water heaters, tankless, 100% of OEMs have tested and approved. On the air side, about 95% or so, I think it's even climbed over that recently, of the OEMs have tested and approved for category 4. Kind of an important thing just to point out here. On their website, they have almost what you'd refer to as a living, breathing document, and it's an OEM matrix link. And you click on it, and it lists out every boiler manufacturer and their model numbers, every furnace manufacturer, almost every furnace manufacturer and their model numbers, every water heater manufacturer, model numbers, and what kind of adapter, if needed. So here's just kind of a snapshot. If you'll notice up here, April 8th was the last time I was online, took this picture. I was just on this morning, and it had updated on to April 24th. So I think a couple of weeks, if there's a new model number that comes online, they add it, and it just continues to add. But you get a couple of quick examples here. What's the country in? US, Canada. So while obviously we're concerned with the US, but they're all appliance adapter. Do I need one? If so, on the gas side, what is it? If I need one in the air intake, what is it? So that's how you'd reference this adapter matrix or OEM approval matrix. The point of it all is it's one of the most important pieces, that adapter. That's the beginning point. You're transitioning from that appliance to this gas venting polypropylene system. You got to make sure you have the right adapter. A couple of comments. Again, 2, 3, and 4 for residential, 6, 8, 10, and 12 for commercial, but the word effective length. And all they're referring to is, because it's this gasketed system, we have a male end of the pipe, and we have this hub with a female connection where the gasket resides. It's an EPM directional gasket we'll talk about. But if you were to take a tape measure out and measure and say I had a 10-foot piece of pipe, well, it actually have 10 foot 4 inches. And so that's why they refer to it as effective lengths. I think there are other manufacturers that might include that hub as your total length. What we call a 10-footer, we're already saying 10 feet 4 inches. But that next piece of pipe is going to take up that hub right there. So the effective length is the effective length. The pitch of the system, very important, no less than 1/4 inch per foot back towards the appliance. They have these rings over here. You see them sitting over here. They refer to them as connector rings, kind of a crucial part of building that joint, making that connection. And so these patented rings are required at every joint, 2 inch, 3 inch, and 4 inch. And that was used to pass that 1738 code, the certification for UL. The maximum continuous vertical run and support up to 164 feet, which obviously exceeds almost every manufacturer's maximum length anyways, by simply having a base support at the bottom and then a chimney cover or a B-vent cover at the top when installing in the chase. They come in different lengths, 1 foot, 2, 3, 6, and then I think they're the only manufacturer right now of poly that's offering a 10-foot section as well. The thing that I want to point out when I look at this picture is a lot of times over the years, everyone's used to using PVC and cutting, deburring, put some solvent on it, clean it up, put some glue on it, make your fitting connection with your coupler, and you move on. With this system here, because it is a system and it's gasketed, so it's different. There is no glue, there is no solvent. Whatever dimension you use of this particular pipe, whatever you cut, once you make that cut, this is all wasted. We're not using it in it. You can't use it. There's no second female hub. There's only one end that has a female where the gasket resides. So the thing to think about is when you're laying out a venting system, in particular the flue gas side of it, is, you know, instead of just buying a bunch of 10s and then having some wasted pipe, you know, you could maybe use a couple of 6s or a 3-footer or a 2-footer or what have you. So it just gives you some options in terms of configuring and putting together the system. Obviously, as fewer joints as possible is the best, but when you have to make those change in directions or what have you, maybe not always buy 10s and then cut and waste. Maybe a 6 or a 3 is the right application. And the EPDM gasketed. And again, this part of the system. It's been in Europe for 35 years. This is what they've been using. But it's, you know, it's an ethylene, propylene, dion, monomer. It's referred to as an M-class system. To resist deterioration. 45s, 30s, 15s. Actually, when you call an elbow, typically it's 90 degrees. This Centrotherm, what they've done is on their 90s, they actually make them 87s. And the reason they do that is to kind of start the pitch. So they're actually got a 3-degree pitch built in. And so as you connect the piping, the vent lengths get longer and longer or further and further away from the appliance, everything is pitched back at least 1/4 inch per foot. When you get into the larger commercial sizes, they're looking for 5/8 inch per foot back to the appliance. Again, we mentioned this, the adapters. We have them for stainless steel. We have them for PVC, CP, coming off the various appliances, etc. Some manufacturers, or they might come off there as a trick, and then you want some accessories to support whatever mechanism or whatever appliance you have in the field. They offer a concentric vent termination unit. So you got some options depending upon your application. Some of the accessories, they'll provide, like this is kind of an important fitting. This might come right off of the adapter, right near the appliance, and they provide a test port. So you can unscrew this and put your combustion analyzer probe right in here, because you certainly don't want to be drilling and putting a hole in some of this pipe. I'm getting a message back that I apologize. My internet connection, it sounds like I'm a bit choppy. I apologize for that. So they have these various condensate and combustion fittings to support drainage on the condensate side and combustion testing on the analyzer side, which is very important when you're setting up or configuring any of these appliances. Some other accessories, very important, support clamps. They offer support clamps as part of their accessory offering. And like I said, to meet the UL 1738 standard, they're going to be supported every 78 inches on the vertical and every 39 inches on the horizontal. Some screens, obviously, third screens, spacers. When we get into the flex, which we'll talk about in a little bit, they're going to have these spacers that are going to be attached, and I'll explain what they do with the flex pipe. Centrotherm, the water-based lube, and used to, when you're putting two pieces of when you're putting a male together with the female to pass through the gasket, water lubricant just allows that easy connection to be made. And so sometimes guys are using just water upfield, and that's fine. That still puts the making it easy, like that joint connection. The downside is if you would ever want to take that fitting apart, because we didn't use the lubricant, you just used water, it will not come apart. When you use the Centrotherm and at a later date you want to, for whatever reason, you want to disassemble that joint, you can just spray some water on that, kind of that where the male piece of the pipe enters into the female, and it will reactivate the lubricant. Come apart if you want. Terminations, they have a low profile, they have a torpedo, like we talked about, they have an end pipe that can go up to the roof, put a bird screen on it. So they have some options. They add a little, what they refer to as carbon black colorant to some of the terminations that are going to see the elements 24/7, 365 for 10, 15 plus years. And they've just found that even though the gray passed the UV 1738 conditions or requirements, I should say, the black is just proven over time to be just a little more resistant, exposed to those elements, in particular the sun. Chimney caps and vent caps, another option if you're using a chase, chimney chase or a B-vent chase. They provide caps. They can be either standard units like they're shown right here, where we get into some custom. When you're getting into actually out in the field, and they kind of, I don't know if they say pride themselves, but they really talk about how fast you can put this stuff together. And basically what you're doing is you're measuring where you're going to make the cut. You either sawzall or hacksaw. You make the cut. There's going to be some deburring. Take a utility knife or a deburring tool. Just clean off. You don't have to chamfer or reshamper the end, even though it comes from the factory with a chamfer on it. That's just how they manufacture it. To make that joint, we don't need that. All we need to do is make sure we deburr it. When you go to put it together, you're going to have the male end. You're going to take that connector ring. You're going to slide it over the male end. You're going to make sure the tabs are facing the female end, the gasket bead. You're going to take some of the Centrotherm. You're going to put a dab, very, very light amount. The more you put on it, it doesn't hurt it or anything. It just takes longer to set. The least amount that you put on it, you're going to have that lubrication so you can get that male end into the hub, but then it will dry and set quicker than if you had an unnecessary amount of Centrotherm on the joint itself. Connector rings, they are required for UL on the 2, 3, and 4 inch commercially. Pound test, joint test without it, but we have been speaking to a lot of people that have been using Centrotherm for the last X number of years. They recommend it. They use it themselves, kind of a belt and suspenders approach. And just a quick comment, when you're making that joint, what they're referring to is, and I don't sit here and read line by line, but a couple things just to highlight. You're going to measure the depth of the female socket. You're going to mark the male end of each component just shy of that depth from the female socket's end. You're going to put the lubricant on, you're going to slip that connector ring, you're going to push and twist the male in until it's properly seated into the female hub, aligning that mark with the top of the female end. And it's just having to do with that, the thermal expansion contraction that can occur when the piping changes temperature, when it gets heated up. Gasket, that EPDM gasket we talked about, it is definitely directional. Every pipe and every fitting will come with a gasket in it. But if for some reason one's missing or it got damaged, you definitely want to check it before you put that fitting together. And what you'll see is, and what they're trying to show up here, the check mark, directionally, that's the V shape, if you will, of that gasket sitting properly so that when that male pipe enters in, it's a smooth transition, slides right past it with the lubricant. What they're trying to highlight here is if you were to replace a gasket because it got damaged or was missing, you don't want to put it in what they'd refer to as backwards, because now as that male pipe starts to slide into that hub, it's actually going to come in contact with that gasket and it's going to probably tear it or take it out of alignment, if you will. It's not proper. So it's not by, it's definitely, excuse me, it's definitely directional, one way. Got to be aware of it. So again, we're talking not a glued system, it's a gasketed system. So there's little nuances that might be new to some people, and you just want to be aware of it, how you put this whole system together. That connector ring, like I said, it's part of the UL 1738 for the smaller residential diameters, but we certainly, and Centrotherm certainly recommends using them on the larger commercial as well. It doesn't hurt you. It's just a slightly added cost to buy the ring, but they make them for the 6 all the way through the 12. And a couple of things just to point out. That connector ring, it almost looks like something got snapped off or it's missing that tab. One end has a tab, or one has this tab right here. The other little prong, if you will, does not, and that's by design. And it's the way it sits on that female connection to that gasket bead. Let's see here, it looks like someone, the question is, how far does the male pipe end do you spread Centrotherm on? No, just the very, very tip, Frank. You know, less than a half an inch, a quarter of an inch, half inch at the most. It's just putting a dollop on your fingertip and just kind of wrapping around that fitting, and it's just to enter, slide past that gasket. That's where the resistance is going to be. So good question. The reason I show you this little Chinese finger strap, a trap, I should say, is when you're looking at the fitting, that connector ring, and the way it sits on the pipe, you're saying it looks like it's kind of cockeyed. Well, it is by design. And that's kind of the angle. That's the purpose, I should say. It's how it passed that 100-pound pull. Is if there's any kind of pressure on that joint, that connector ring comes into play and fights that resistance. And that's how they passed the 1738. The other part, the support clamps, very, very important. And like we said, 78 inches on the vertical, 39 on the horizontal. They provide this quick locking support clamp. Again, here's kind of a visual. On the smaller diameter, you're going to need a minimum of a quarter-inch pitch per foot coming back to the appliance. And here we're just showing the support rings, support clamps, I should say, every 39 and every 78. When you get into the larger diameter pipe, same 39 and 78, but just at a little steeper 5/8 and a foot pitch back to the appliance. One of the product offerings that has been popular and will continue to continue its popularity is this thing called Inno Flu Flex, and it's flexi pipe, and it's being used in chimney chases and B-vent chases, etc. It's just instead of having a bunch of joints being made as you're passing up or passing down your various lengths, you can just drop it down or pull it up depending upon which one's easier. A couple things just to point out or highlight. That spacers that I mentioned, they almost look like spider legs. They're going to snap on. They're plastic and they're flexible. They're not rigid. And the whole point of these spacers is just to keep the pipe that's inside the flex, it's inside, whether it be B-vent or chase, from hitting the wall. They just want to keep it off the wall. So what happens is every 7 to 8 inches, you'd be clipping on, snapping on one of these spacers, and then either dropping the pipe down, or if you were pulling it up with a string or rope. So they'd be adding it down here or adding it up on the roof. The only other comment here, the highlight, this is the base support. And in the chimney, it's sitting on a, looks like a piece of strut that's tapped into the chimney wall. And this device here sits here, and there's my transition from flex to rigid pipe. Can be offset up to 45 degrees. We don't want to go beyond that because we're corrugated on the outside as well as the inside. We don't want any chance of puddling or pooling of condensate. That comes with integrated couplers on the 3 and the 4 inch. The 2 inch you're going to make. They have a fitting that we would use to connect. They come in coils, 25, 35, 50 foot. Again, the whole thing is it's a system. It's engineered for flexibility. Typically masonry chimneys, B vent or L vent, some of the popular applications that have been used. So they're just showing us here maybe an application where I'm taking sidewall air intake to the appliance, and then I'm venting the flue gases up through an existing chimney chase. And here we're just highlighting, this would be a chimney cap that they manufacture. They do manufacture, and it's specifically to seal the top of that chimney. And they have, you know, standard units as well as they make custom quite often. Quick comment, a quick note to make is whatever the distance is to get to the high point of that top of that chimney, they always say add an additional 2 feet of the pipe, and that's to support the chimney cap that's going to be installed. So at the base, I have that base unit assembly that's going to support. I'm going to have my transition piece that's going to my flex, and then I'm going to run up to the high point. I'm going to put my cap or the base, the underneath part of my base chimney cap. I'm going to put a ring on here. I'm going to cut the residual flex pipe. I'm going to put my end cap on the top, and then I'm going to drop my final piece, and that's kind of the finished product of a chimney cap. Same thing, just a little different look on the B vent, and they can make multiple flue configurations. They can do a single flue. Here they're showing same thing. I might be bringing in some sidewall air intake, and then I have some rigid, solid single wall pipe until I get to my base support. Here I'm not in a chimney, so I'm using a little band, almost like a base band support, that I drop that base fitting in here, run vertically through my B vent. I'm showing a kind of a cutaway here of the flex inside up to my cap, my B vent cap. They'll have that flex pipe that's going to sit inside the top of the chimney or the B vent cap. This is my base, vertical base, run base support. It's going to be either on a strut for chimney applications perhaps, or the base support bracket for more of a B vent application. These spacers, they just snap together. You're going to put them around each every 78 inches on the piece of pipe, like we said. A couple of quick pictures. They're just showing multiple. This is obviously a much larger original boiler plant, and then they're taking advantage of that large B vent and using it as a chase for several, as it appears, probably high efficiency category 4 boilers, or most likely boilers. Here's an example just using that support bracket at the base for perhaps a B vent run of the flexi. And again, just another installation example showing they're using Unistrut to support these base unit assemblies. Kind of a before and an after picture showing a B vent. So this was the original B vent that would have been used on maybe the mid efficiency or lower efficiency furnace or boiler. And then they're transitioning high efficiency, and they're, in this case here, maybe they're bringing it or dropping down the flexi pipe. And the final product would look something like this, with the B vent cap and that little end cap coming through, and then have a sheet metal screw attached to the B vent transition piece. So they offer these kits and these component kits. And the kits have to do with the coil, the lengths available of the various diameter pipe, 2 inch, 3 inch, and 4 inch. They come in different lengths. So they refer to them as just a coil kit. The component kits, they include all the fittings and accessories required to either line a B-vent or a chimney, minus the coil. And the amount of spacers they provide are for 50 feet. So every, almost like every probably 8 of them, somewhere in that range, 8 or 9 per 50 foot. One comment to make, to be aware of, is with the corrugated, it's going to offer obviously a little more frictional resistance to the airflow through the fan assembly down at the appliance, furnace or boiler, water heater. So as a general rule, 1 foot of flex is equivalent to 2 feet of TEL, total equivalent length. So you want to be aware of that, so you don't have that full 100-foot physical length because of that frictional resistance or that corrugated resistance inside this. So just be aware of that. Like I said earlier, custom terminations, they do that quite regularly. They're pretty quick at it too, and they're very cost effective. A couple of quick, flexi, frequently asked questions. Cannot be installed horizontally. I think we mentioned that, but you definitely can't. You don't want to allow the pooling of condensate or wreak havoc with the venting system in terms of the fan, and kind of it really could create some flame loss while running, issues, etc. Only installed inside a chase. Can handle offsets, but they're just saying, please don't go past the 45 degrees so we don't get into that chance of puddling any kind of condensate. You might have multiple offsets, that's okay. Moving on a little bit now in some of the commercial venting applications with Inno Flu. They have this software, they refer to it as Vent Bomb. And what can happen is they'll have like a quotation software where we'll have like a line drawn sketch with some dimensions of what we're trying to accomplish. We'll send it up to the factory, up to Albany, and they'll be able to implement it into this software program and spit out a bill of materials, a 2D schematic, a 3D design drawing, as obviously as well as a quote. So it's just it's a nice feature to kind of get it right. They manufacture these manifolds. When you have an application where the manufacturer of the appliance allows you to do common venting, they can make a common vent manifold. And they'll have the main trunk, and they'll have these Y takeoffs that will then receive the individual either air intake or flue gas exhaust connections. So we would be telling them the BTUs and the connection points down here, and then they would calculate the size as well as the size of these Y fittings to feed the individual boilers or furnaces. Just a quick example. Branches are available in 3 through 12, and the feeders are single wall available 2 through 10. A couple of quick installation examples. Just want to point out a couple of things here also as well. One is there are the connector rings that we talked about that are connected to that female hub, that gasket bead. So the side of the connector ring that has that tab is snapped in here. Oops. And then the one that's missing, it looks like it's missing the tab, is actually positioned on the other side, the male side of that female hub. And that's that Chinese finger strap, if you will. So they're located on all these various joints all through here. They're handling the condensate through this trap here. They're just not showing the piping that would be going down to the condensate pump or condensate line. They just want to handle that condensate before you probably have dampers that are on the discharge of each boiler that close when the boiler's not firing. So they just catch the condensate here before it sits on that plate or that damper. Another common vent example, installation example, I should say. And again, they're actually happen to show doing it for both the flue gas as well as the air intake, which is fine. It certainly is. That's a viable option. But I'm just also showing just a quick example, commercial application, single, individually vented. They're not doing common vents. So they do them up to 12-inch. This happens to be a 10-inch, but so you can have commercial applications. They're not all going to be common vented. They can be individually vented as well. When you get into some commercial applications within a plenum and you need to meet that certain standard, the flame spread and the smoke developed index, we talked about it earlier, but that's all about the 1738. And what they're saying here is you just wrap that pipe, that Centrotherm Inno Flu pipe, with some of these approved plenum wraps. They've all been approved and they will meet that standard. Same thing going through a wall. If you need a 1 or 2 hour fire rating for a particular building code in a commercial setting, the Centrotherm pipe itself will meet that criteria. One last thing I just want to share with you is they recently introduced this line called Blitz or Blitz Flex, and it's for air intake. It has nothing to do with flue gases, doesn't have even the right material to be manufactured to support flue gases. It's not intended, never tested for, but it is designed for having almost like one continuous intake, air intake run of pipe as an option. There are other options. You can use Centrotherms, the more traditional. You can use the PVC. You can use, air intake is pretty flexible. They're just thinking here, if you're running maybe a flexi on the flue gas, we have an alternative that maybe you can use and run in parallel with it for the air intake as an option. And it's basically 2 SKUs. They have the coil. It's a 50-foot coil that comes depending upon the diameter. And then it has a termination, which is going to be some pipe, adapter off of the appliance, some support connector rings that you can snap onto this and kind of nail it or screw it up along the wall, perhaps a screen for your final piece. So anyways, it's a little different. It's new to the industry, but they're having a little bit of success, initially. I'm getting them to change this. They're just trying to show how it's a single run all the way from the roof down to the appliance. But this is basically an absolute don't do out of most manufacturers' installation manuals. And it's not that they don't mind different pressure zones, but they almost always would prefer the exact opposite. Bring in my makeup air in a different pressure zone down here on the horizontal, and then take all of my products of combustion out through the roof to eliminate any chance of flue gas recirculation from taking place. But to bring all my makeup in here and then just have a short run of flue, that would violate most installation manuals. So we're going to probably have that picture changed. But anyway, so just showing here's the kit that comes. It's the coil and the termination unit. We're looking at this as possibly an application. Well, they're promoting it. Centrotherm is. We just haven't come across one yet, but we're looking into it. Where you take your flexi, and that's going to be your flue gas going through. In this case, here it looks like a B vent cap, but the way that outer portion sits on that original B vent, whatever that diameter is, 4-inch or what have you. There's a gap, there's an airspace all the way around by design. And that air can be pulled into that Blitz pipe and be a source of makeup air down to your appliance. So that could be you drop down the flexi on the flue side and drop down the Blitz on the air intake. Again, mentioned it earlier, that OEM matrix, you can print it out if you wanted to, but it's a living, breathing document on their website, and it lists out every manufacturer, what their various model numbers are, if you need an adapter, if you don't, on some of them, they might have like a universal adapter on some of these Lochinvar models. They'll just say, hey, Centrotherm, single wall, 2, 3, 4 inch rivet diameter. If it doesn't have one of those universal adapters, then it'll say, yes, you need this particular flue gas appliance adapter and perhaps an air intake adapter. They manufacture these, provide these aftermarket tags, inspector tags. Sometimes you might bump up against an inspector that's just not that familiar, perhaps, with Centrotherm, and they're just looking for more information to make sure it's an approved product, which it is. And like I said, it's met all the criteria for the United States and North America. But anyway, so it's just a tag that can be applied to the product left on site. And with that, I am going to open it up. I thank you. I thank everybody for taking the time this morning to attend this.